This really does look like a workhorse. I'm so pleased to see that Heljan have got this weathering pretty much perfectly out of the box. Well, a very good morning to you guys. It is really great to see you. I hope I find you well and that you've braved the really extreme weather that we've been having all around the globe, actually. It's been quite a turbulent time, but it's good to have you along. And what we got today is a box opening and review. Now, this is a product that I've had on my radar for actually quite a few years, and this is a re-release of the product. It's come back out. It's from Heljan. It's the Class 27, and I've taken an opportunity to pick one of these up, and I thought I'd share it with you and let you take a look at ride along as well and see what you think too. It's the Heljan Class 27 diesel locomotive, so without further ado, come with me and I'll show you that. But first of all, I'd like to make you aware of today's channel sponsor. This is Train-O-Matic. They are makers and designers of DCC decoders and accessories. These are designed to be as easy to use as possible, and they just work first time every time with all manufacturers of locomotives without any real need to fiddle about with CV settings, so it just makes the job so much easier. Check them out at the website www.train-o-matic.com. Anyway, come with me. Let's take a look at this. So here is the model, and I've really been looking forward to get a Class 27 in my fleet. It's been one of the big glaring gaps, really. The Classes 26 and 27, they've been out from Heljan for a while. Now, I recently picked up a Class 26, and I've been waiting for the tops numbered versions of the Class 27 to turn up. And they finally have done. So I've got a box code there, 2730, Class 27, number 27001 in BR green, full yellow ends. This is version 3, heavily weathered. And actually it's really interesting because what it actually is it's a BR green liveried model but with the tops number. And I have to say the blue ones with the full yellow surrounds on the windows never really did anything for me. There's just something about that livery. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't really quite hit the mark for me. So when I saw that this was available in this green with the tops number, it was the perfect scenario because I think they really do suit the BR green, it has to be said. I'm not a huge fan of BR green on diesels, but in this case I do make an exception because this is a very pretty locomotive, and I think there's very few BR locomotives, BR diesel locomotives, which can actually carry off the green and really look the part. And I think for me, it's these white window surrounds that do it. But before we get to that, I'm just going to show you some of the packaging in here. These are user applicable detailing pieces, and just like we saw on a number of other models that we've done, a lot of these you don't really apply unless you're going to have, say for example, one end you're not going to bother with the coupling and you're going to do the full buffer beam detail. Now that's quite plausible. Heljan do cover you with enough of the buffer beam detailing stuff to do both ends of the locomotive, and actually the couplings are in there as well. The couplings that are on it I've taken out of spare, so I didn't have to break the seal on this bag. Not for any other reason than I just didn't want little bits shedding themselves into the packaging on the sly. Also in the box we've got the paperwork that accompanies this, and I do like to show this. It's something that Heljan and actually a Scale as well do incredibly well, because they kind of counter out of the box, so to speak, the accusations that, oh, these models, they're getting too expensive. Why is it so expensive? Well, that's a full list of every single bit that is in this locomotive, and these by and large have to be assembled by hand. And this is something that I think that actually manufacturers do themselves justice to do this. Explain to your customers just how complex their models really are. You know, when you've got to pay somebody by the hour, multiple people by the hour, to put all these together, you've got to have all the molds to make this stuff. You've got to put, do everything you need to make this into this. That does cost money. And I think Heljan, by actually showing you that, this is where they justify the price, and I like that. We might not like high prices, but when the manufacturers justify the high prices, that's all right in my book. So well played, Heljan. This here is the model, and actually factory applied weathering can be another whole can of worms. But as we get this out of the box, what you can see is that this is not a blowover with an airbrush. There is a lot of thought gone into the layout of the weathering on this, and no more so than when you look at the roof. So we've got the darkening of the sort of sooting of the exhaust, and I guess that would naturally mean that this would be the dominant end that we've got here, because the sooty exhaust has kind of trailed across the roof. We've also got this very subtle darkening with dirt around vents and stuff, and this works so well. It's one of the best factory weathered schemes that I've seen on a locomotive, on a diesel locomotive at least, straight from the factory, and I think Heljan have got this perfectly. Further down we can see we've got that kind of brake dust dirt, the kind of stuff that just builds up on the side of a locomotive, and it's done really well. It's not a kind of basting effect that you sometimes see, which I think spoils some really good locomotives. You can see that it's concentrated on the bogies and the underframe, and then it kind of fades as it goes up the bodywork, and this really does look like a workhorse. I'm so pleased to see that Heljan have got this weathering pretty much perfectly out of the box. As for the locomotive itself, let's look to the detail before we gush too much about this livery. Rivet detail on the roof is exquisite. Again, really, really fine, to the verge of almost not being there, but it's enough to show you it's there. It looks scale, it looks perfect. And they've got all of these seams in, the different bits and pieces. Everything is where it should be. This locomotive really does look like a quality product. The paint job as well, it's not just a mask off and spray grey and then hope for the best. All of these side panels, these vents, they're all picked out in black before the weathering is applied, and it really does massively improve it for that. The characteristic face of these locomotives is captured well. These were nicknamed muck rats along with the Class 26s because whilst they weren't initially deployed to the Scottish region, they did subsequently find their way up there en masse, and it's where they lived out an awful lot of their lives and became very prolific over an awful lot of lines. So whereas the Class 25 was the rat, these were the Scottish rats or the muck rats. So that's where the nickname comes from. The front faces on these are very different from a Class 25. It's got much more in the way of a rounded front end, and Heljan have managed to capture that really, really well. The roof detail, the way that curves around the head code box as well, is really nicely done. We also have a whole host of other detail. The windows, well, they actually look really nice. The glazing in there is nicely done. The windows are actually fairly clean. The brush over with the weathering has been done quite well, so it hasn't fogged up the glass, and that's always good to see. But I especially like, you can see almost this kind of cleaning effect on the front, where they've sprayed it with weathering, but then presumably whilst it's still wet, it's had a little bit of a wipe. I don't know whether that's by accident or by design, but what I see here really does look great. Further down we have, well, a little bit of the buffer beam detail is factory applied with this, I think it's probably something to do with electric train heat, something like that, and that is factory applied. It is actually quite an obvious one, so it's probably good that it is there. They also supply it with these 3-link couplings ready attached. They are good enough to use if you use 3-link couplings, but one of my little gripes about these is they do tend to become quite entangled in the tension lock coupling if you do use them like I do. And you have to very carefully kind of thread it in there. Otherwise, what I've found is that the coupling can get pushed to one side, and that can lead to derailments and slipped couplings if you're not careful. There doesn't appear to be any ready way to remove the 3-link chain on there, and I do feel that there's possibly a better way that they could have done with this. Yes, it does look an exquisitely detailed part, but it causes no end of problems for those of us like me, and I think I'm probably in the majority, who use the tension lock couplings. The buffers, they are nice turned metal, spring loaded, and you can see there, scale thickness, really nicely done. We've got separately applied metal handrails and separately applied windscreen wipers as well, and this builds up a really good, effective, prototypical 3D effect on that front there. In the head code, we've got this 8A26, and I'm guessing by this point the locomotive wouldn't have, the head codes wouldn't have been in use, so they would have usually been wound round to whatever some little wag at the depot felt like, or just left at whatever head code had been the very last that had been properly used. For turn to the side, again, that Class 27 look is captured really well. We've got the tablet catching recess at this end. It's nice and sharp, and the paint finish as well has picked it out really well. The windows too, we've got these sort of raked back look on there. It's just really nicely done, and the white window surround is on there, even though we've got the full yellow ends. One of the things I have noticed is that the inside of the cabs are very basic indeed. There actually doesn't seem to be anywhere to put a sitting driver figure. It's quite flat. The saving grace is that actually it's not all that noticeable when you're looking through the windows, so actually just a minor detraction. Looking down along the body side, the kind of fat bulk of these locomotives is captured really well. We've got the characteristic centre door as well, and that's picked out really nice. It's quite a fine detail in there, but it does look like a real door would. Then we've also got the windows into the engine room, and these again, the glazing looks nice. It seems to be sitting where it should be, and everything is where it should be. We've got extra detail on here, and again, this is part of the main moulding, but it is nicely done. And these vents on the side with the kind of metal gauze over the top really does work well. It's difficult to tell if that's a separately applied piece or whether it's very, very well done in the moulding, but whatever it is, it does look as it should. And I particularly like the ribs that would have been behind the actual reel mesh on the real locomotives, and it is captured ever so well. The white body side stripe really does set off this livery, and I think it's probably the reason why this class of locomotive could wear BR green so well and so gracefully, and it's this centre stripe just does the job. Where it goes across that grille, it is accurately represented across the centrepiece there. And then looking to the cabs, we appear to have separately applied metal handrails, and these are recessed just like the real thing, really nicely done. The cab windows on this end as well are modelled in the open position, so you get one closed and one open, and if I turn it over, it's the same on both sides. Other tampo printing is all there and exquisite. We've got the tops number. Now 27001 is actually one of the examples of this class that ended up getting preserved. So what I've got here is a model that is suitable for a wide range of periods, and I suspect that this is modelled accurately for kind of that changeover period in the 1970s where locomotives not yet due a repaint would have got the tops number but not necessarily been fully repainted. And I've seen this model before, back when I did a Class 25 and I believe a Class 20 as well, and they do make an interesting bit of variety for an otherwise all blue BR tops era fleet of sort of the late 1970s. That said as well, being a preserved locomotive, it's very possible that this locomotive could have been repainted towards the very end of its life in the sort of late 1980s, and this may have been a heritage livery which was reasonably popular by BR for locomotives that were running rail tours. And because it's a preserved locomotive, you can also explain this away as being its current livery on a preserved line, so very applicable to a number of different periods. The other thing as well to note, which is really good, is that each side is not entirely a mirror image of the other. If you note there where the BR crest is, and then I turn it over, you'll notice that the BR crests are both at the same end of the body. The tablet catches, though, are mirrored, just like on the real thing. The vents, though, they as well are exactly where they should be on either side, and it really is a nice package. Going back to the roof, this roof vent is really exquisite. It is a metal separately applied piece, and there is a fan inside there, and when I look down through, if I move my hand away, you can see right through the bogies, and it gives that great sense of depth and detail in there, which just for me works, whether it was by accident or by design. Looking to the other end of the locomotive, I'd just like to draw attention to that weathering. I wasn't sure whether it was by accident or by design, and what I'm actually thinking here is it is by design, and it is a really, really thoughtfully done factory weather job. The way it's kind of partially rubbed clean on the front, I just really do like that effect. It just works. Looking to the underside of the locomotive, we've got the fuel tank and battery box, which are actually pretty solidly on there. It's a problem that I've had with some of the earlier Heljan locomotives, the class 17 in particular, that these boxes had this tendency of being a bit too loose, and they could fall off very readily, with the little tabs that hold them in breaking off. There doesn't appear to be a problem with this, and certainly I've been through the process of DCC fitting, running it, handling, and have just not had any problems whatsoever. So it's nice to see that Heljan have listened to feedback and addressed that. The bogies and the bogie frames as well, they're all really nicely done, and this weathering really does bring out the detail just nicely. Heljan diesel locomotive bogies I find can be a little bit two-dimensional at times, but actually they work quite well in this form. When you turn it over, you can see that there is a lot of open space inside the bogies, but from viewing distances, you're never going to have this upside down. It really does work quite well, and it allows easy access into the all-wheel pickups for ease of cleaning if you need to remove muck and stuff from behind there. As I said, it picks up from all 8 wheels, and the drive is all-wheel drive, so it makes this locomotive pretty reasonable and sure-footed. It won't pull as much as something like a Bachmann Class 25, which I've always really found to be one of the benchmarks for haulage, but it certainly does get close, and certainly for most people, you're not really going to tax the pulling power of this locomotive. When I was running it, it runs down to an absolute crawl. It's really sure-footed, and it exudes this sense of weight and presence, which really does make it a super reliable locomotive on the track. When it came to DCC fitting it, though, this is where I found it not quite as straightforward as some of the other Heljan locomotives that I've been chipping recently. The Class 26 wasn't too bad, and I think with this, part of the issue may be the factory-applied weathering. So I am inclined to believe that if you get one of the unweathered versions that are available in BR Green or BR Blue, you're probably not going to have quite as much problem. But it does seem that the weathering application may have just ever so slightly stuck the lid to the chassis a little bit more than you'd find with other locomotives. That said, it was still reasonably straightforward to prise the lid off. When we came to do that, I chose from our sponsor a Trainomatic 8-pin chip. This locomotive does have an 8-pin socket. Now, when I turned to the actual paperwork that comes with it, I found it a little bit vague on the DCC fitting. It doesn't really explain properly for me how to remove the top. On the Daypole models that I've reviewed recently, it was much more explicit where you could find the tabs and the clips to be able to prise the body loose and lift it clear. With this, it kind of just leaves you foundering about a bit, which I thought was just, again, a missed opportunity. It wouldn't have taken much to just put that right. Once we were inside the locomotive, it has this 8-pin socket and there is plenty of room. So fitting the Trainomatic 8-pin decoder in there was really, really easy. I used a little bit of black electrical tape just to hold the wiring in place and to make sure that none of those wires came anywhere near to anything that could get in the way, either to prevent you getting the top back on or to get a wire trapped that could fray and rub and then cause mystery shorts. So all in all, it was a reasonably easy DCC fitting. Once that chip was in, the running characteristics of this locomotive were just quite frankly superb. I didn't need to change any of the CV settings, but I've come to expect that from the Train-O-Matic decoders. When running this locomotive, the lighting functions on DCC are really good. There's no dip switches on this to change them if you're running it on DC, unlike some of the Daypol and Bachmann models that we've reviewed. But actually, if you're a DCC decoder user like myself, it is really nice to be able to fully control the various different lighting functions. Any 8-pin decoder would fit into these, and also sound decoders are available from a number of manufacturers, but again, make sure you get the 8-pin fitted one. There is space in the chassis for a speaker, and it all in all seems to be a very well thought out chassis design. So we do now come to the score. As I said before, the Class 27 has been a glaring omission in my diesel locomotive collection, and one that I've wanted for quite some time. And it's really great to see that Heljan have brought back this beloved model. It was a good model then, and it's a great model now. The factory finished weathering is really, really good, but this model is available in pre and post tops liveried BR blue, also in rail green, and as you see here in this really quite unusual BR tops numbered BR green. We've put some affiliate links down below, and these take you to where these models can be picked up from either Hattons or Rails. As I always say, the affiliate links are there for your convenience. It does not cost you a single penny extra if you follow those and buy the model to add to your own collection, but it does help out the channel. So first up, to finish, I really do like the final finish of this locomotive. It is really well detailed, and there just isn't really anything on this finish that I felt that I could fault. So for me, for the finish, I'm going to give this a 10 out of 10. So functionality, I found that this actually ran really, really well. There wasn't really any problems whatsoever. There was great momentum to it, and it held the track really, really well. My one little gripe was those 3-link couplings, which, as you can see there, they kind of get in the way of the tension lock coupling and cause no end of issues if you don't first kind of very fiddly try and line them up to just go through the middle of that tension lock coupling. And for me, it's a gripe which seems to be shared across a great many Heljan locomotives. And in my view, it would probably be better functionality for most, if not nearly all, of the users if that 3-link coupling maybe was a user-fitted detail. I don't know, but certainly for me, it did take a little bit out of the functionality when I was running this, so I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. Turning now to ease of use, well, this was an area where I felt that things could have been improved slightly. It was a little bit difficult to get into it, to DCC fit it. I put some of that down to the weathering finish, so it's a trade-off. It is such a great finish. But the instructions that came with the locomotive were just perilously vague when it came to getting the lid off. And because it clips on rather than screws on, there's no real obvious clues as to what you need to do. And I felt that it was very easy to cause some kind of damage in doing so. I didn't want to use any sharp implements because notoriously weathering factory applied can be not quite as robust as the original finish, and putting scratches into this weathering would have just looked quite odd. So for ease of use, that spoilt it a little bit for me, and I'm going to give it a 7.9 out of 10. And now we turn to aesthetics, and as I said before, this livery really does work for this class of locomotive, and that weathering in particular is exquisite. It just didn't put anything wrong. And the thought that has gone into this application is just great. This is the best of all worlds. A locomotive that carries off the BR green so perfectly. Tops numbers, ticking a box with pedants and OCD merchants like me. And then this weathering. This weathering is exquisite, particularly the way that it has been customized on the ends so perfectly. So aesthetics, it gets a 10 out of 10. So we turn to value for money. Now, Heljan do make a habit of, it's feast and famine. They bring out a whole load of different liveries of these, and then we're waiting and waiting and waiting for them to come out. So I think that these are going to sell really fast. Does that mean they offer value for money? Well, I do believe that they do. It is a really good model, and the price that they're being sold at is eminently reasonable. This, as a factory weathered model, has a slightly higher RRP, but you do expect that for that extra application of finish, and boy, have they really given you value for money on that. So I would place this at a 9.2 out of 10 for value for money. All those put together give us a final score of what is actually quite a respectable 46.1 out of 50. I really do like this locomotive, and it is going to be a welcome addition to my fleet. Can I recommend this? Yes, I certainly can. And with the livery options available, Heljan have you covered for every single period that these locomotives ran in. They might not have been as long lasting as the Class 26s, but certainly they are every bit as beautiful. Well, I hope you really enjoyed that, and I hope you approve of the good look-see that we gave that. And if I've really tickled your fancy, and you really quite fancy picking up one of those for yourself, just to help you out, we've got a couple of affiliate links down in the description box below. Now this will take you through to either Rails of Sheffield or Haddon's Model Railways, where hopefully these are some of the best prices that we've been able to find them out there on the open market. Now following and buying through the affiliate link does not cost you any extra whatsoever, but it does help the channel out an awful lot. And also don't forget to like this video, share it too, and subscribe to the channel. You'll be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. And also I'd love to hear from you as well, just what you thought about this model. You can leave your comments in the comment box down below. I do read every single one, even if I don't get the time to respond to them all, so I'd love to hear from you. But until next time, you stay safe and take good care of yourself, and I look forward to seeing you then. Bye for now. Today's video is sponsored by Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive. Visit train-o-matic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, but a special thanks go out to Anthony Kidson, Michael Churchwood, Alec Ralph, Anthony Hunt, William Wade, Wayne Johns, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Tepic, Michael Lockie, and Helen Sink. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.